You're listening to Femfluence Radio, created for women desiring more influence and affluence and are looking for other women who want the same. I'm your host, Jennifer Kemp, but you can call me Jen. I'm a serial entrepreneur and founder who's built 4 multi-million-dollar companies. I'm also a mom to 3 amazing humans and a wifey to the self-proclaimed slay-at-home dad. Whoa, that makes me tired just saying out loud. On this show, we'll have the real BS-free conversations that every woman wants to have, but no one's talking about with the honesty we deserve. We'll chat on the intersection of too muchness and not enoughness, what aligned success looks and feels like, and what it takes to dismantle old systems, beliefs, and thinking that get in the way of what we really want. If you're an ambitious woman looking for a collective that will support you as you grow into the next level leader you and everyone else knows, likes, and trusts, then stick around because you're already home and amongst friends. Now, let's go build longer tables together. Okay, so today I'm going to show you my super geeky side. And because I'm a brand strategist and futurist, even though Femfluence Radio is for women who want to create more affluence and influence in the world, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about and teach you about how to up-level your aesthetics, whether it's on your website, on your social media, on the way that you present yourself in terms of how you look on LinkedIn. Your aesthetics are the iconic stamp that marks your personal brand in leadership. And part of standing out in the world and the area of branding that usually has the most interest, I get so many questions about this, is how a brand looks and feels. And that has everything to do with the aesthetics. So I want to kind of in this episode give you a masterclass, frankly, on the science of aesthetics and what it means and how to use it in a powerful way. And there are 5 areas that I'm going to cover inside of this episode. I'm going to cover number 1, color, number 2, typography, number 3, symbology, number 4, function, and number 5, relevance. Now, again, if you have been looking to rebrand yourself or you know someone who is, this episode is going to be, I think, a really interesting and educational one. So stay with me so I can talk about not just the tactical pieces of aesthetics, but how it actually helps people understand what your brand is trying to emit and emote. So these 5 things that I mentioned are important to aesthetics, can really support you in standing out in the world. And honestly, aesthetics are more than putting on a pretty face in the world through your website or social media. It's actually cognitive science. Yep, I told you we're going to get geeky here. And if you're geeky and glamorous like I am, you'll appreciate this episode because, as I said, it's a masterclass in how to use aesthetic impact to build up your affluence and influence. So let's jump in. The first piece of aesthetics is color. So color psychology. And just like brands themselves, the colors you use in branding are just perception. They mean something, but they also mean nothing, especially to people who aren't your ideal audience. Making colors mean something is 100% in the brain and muscle memory of the beholder. So as discussed in the episode in Archetypes, branding is all about architecting reality by influencing and shaping consumer perception using stories. However, color is among the fundamental visual stimuli in the human sequence of cognition. And these questions are important. So when I teach you the master brand method, we recommend that the color palette that is generally supportive of your dominant brand archetype. Now, if you're just joining us and you don't know what a dominant brand archetype is, just go over to the episode on archetypes. It's a couple episodes before this, and I actually give you a free gift in it so that you can find out what that is. And then this episode, especially on color, will make a lot more sense to you. But just keep listening in so you can hear the whole piece and then go back to that episode. So when it comes down to the psychology of color, context and culture matter, because one color can actually represent two wildly divergent feelings. So it's really important that you get guidance on this. For example, when you get married in Asia, the prominent dress color that they wear is not white like it is in the Western world, in America specifically. Actually, the color white represents death in most countries in Asia. So most people wear the color red to signify celebration and good luck and good fortune. So that's what I mean by culture does matter when you're choosing your colors. But the main thing you need to know is that based on the marketing of your brand, you get to influence how people see the way you use color to support it. And you do that by learning the next thing, which is also your typography. So just like your brand, and just like the colors you use for your brand, typography has a personality all of its own. And there's actually so much psychology and science in this one, but to keep it simple, here are some of the things you want to consider when choosing a font for your brand. So what are the types of fonts that you put on your website, on your business cards, on your social media? Well, first of all, a lot of people know this. There are serif fonts and there are sans serif fonts. Sans serif simply means not fancy, okay? Serif means fancy, and sans serif means not fancy. So when you use serif fonts, they are better used to be readable when you are in print or you want to convey elegance and rationale. Whereas sans serif fonts, or what I call fancy fonts, are more readable on a screen and they convey informality and innovation. So what I tell people a lot when they're doing their branding is you want to have one dominant serif font and one or two dominant sans serif fonts that you use in all of your communication. Now, another difference in typography is light versus bold fonts. So light fonts convey beauty and femininity, whereas medium weight fonts are more readable and bold fonts convey power and masculinity. So when you're doing your messaging in your aesthetics, use light versus bold in that way. Also, there's rounded versus angular fonts. So rounded fonts convey comfort, softness, and femininity, and angular fonts convey formality, durability, and masculinity. And by the way, when I mention feminine versus masculine, it doesn't mean rounded fonts are mainly for women and angular fonts are mainly for men. It's about the message you're conveying. That's what's most important to get here. Another type of font usage is simple versus complex. So simple fonts convey directness. They just get straight to the point. Whereas complex fonts convey uniqueness. They require the reader or the seer to unpack it a little bit to understand it. And that's done on purpose. Another type of font usage is slanted versus straight. So when you use a slanted font, that conveys movement. It conveys momentum inside of your font usage, versus straight fonts convey stability. You can trust those fonts, okay? And so it just again depends on the message you're trying to convey. Then there are lowercase versus uppercase fonts. So lowercase fonts convey compassion and innovation, whereas uppercase conveys power and strength. And when you use them mixed together, they're more readable. So the main thing you want to know is when you use fonts only for headlines, you don't want to necessarily always do them in sentence case. It really depends, again, on the usage. Another type of font family, if you will, is separated versus connected. So separated letters convey fragmentation and individuality, whereas connected letters convey unity and collectivism. So connected letters a lot of times are what we call scripted fonts. So when you want to show unity, you use script, okay? And when you want to use more formal terms, you separate them. Another type of family of fonts is condensed versus extended fonts. So condensed fonts convey tightness and precision in your communication, whereas extended fonts convey spaciousness and relaxation. So depending again on your type of business or your type of personal brand, you want to be thoughtful about how you use them there. And then finally, there are short fonts, little stubby fonts versus tall fonts. So short fonts convey stability, that they have a good foundation, whereas tall fonts convey lightness, aspiration. So again, I gave you a lot of different ideas, but the key is that as you're working with a designer or you're working with a client, even maybe you have a marketing company or you help people put this stuff together, talk to them about what their preferences are and also talk to them about their audience work. Because remember, in the last 2 episodes, we talked about using your archetype and your audience as the 2 sides of the coin that pays you. And that gives information to what kind of aesthetics you should build your brand around. So the third aspect of aesthetics is symbology or iconography. And the best way to think about choosing an icon, or, kind of like people think of logos as either the typeface logo or the logo, which really is the icon. Okay. So one way to quickly assess whether or not the icon that you're using is impactful is take out your smartphone right now and take a look at it. Go ahead, do it right now. Here's the thing. When I look at my iPhone, I don't need to see the words. The icons tell the story for me. So on my particular home screen, if you could see me right now, I have my most used apps, right? Each app is represented by a small symbol, which is an icon. So for example, PayPal, where I send money and I receive money in my business, a lot of ways, has its double P logo. Twitter is represented by a tweeting bird. Facebook uses its stylized F. And if you also notice, Facebook has over time made its icon a little bit brighter blue, so it really stands out on your home screen. And Instagram has a retro looking camera as its icon. So without any words, we know what these symbols represent, what they mean, and where they fit into our lives. They help us navigate the world, especially in today's online world. And symbols are a powerful element of your brand identity system that extends beyond your logo. Right now, when you think about your goal, if you're building your brand, you want to create a visual shorthand using symbols to connect and engage your customers. Here's what's interesting. Icons become so embedded in the subconscious and conscious mind of your clients that when you make a big change, it can freak people out. Take the recent Slack app transformation. Now, if you don't use Slack, Slack is an app and a system that a lot of people in teams use for communication. And they changed their logo and it had very polarizing reactions to it. But here's what they did when they did it. And I'm going to be honest with you, my initial reaction to it as a brand strategist was I hated it. I absolutely hated it. But also as a brand strategist, I was curious about why they made the change. And what was really nice to see is the Slack team took great care in explaining why they changed it. And that really helped us understand and be more with it. And they did it actually to be more usable over time for their company identity. And my point here is you will make changes to your logo. You will make changes to your icon. Every major brand in the world has done that. I've changed my logo a few times. So don't be freaked out. I think people take a long time to figure out what their icon is. I obviously want you to be happy with it and feel like it's part of you and that it represents what you're up to. But just know it will evolve over time as your business grows and expands. The main thing is, as I said, when you communicate using icons, you can make those changes and they will happen. And I will explain more on that in a minute. But before we do, let's move into the fourth thing to consider when doing your aesthetics, and that is that it's functional. So iconic, innovative brands that are showing how to make simple solutions fit today's world are the best known brands out there right now. And let me give you a few examples of some of my favorite functional aesthetics brands that are out there. So for example, Peloton, which if you follow me on Instagram, you will know that Peloton is one of my favorite current brands because I have a Peloton bike at home and I absolutely love it. I'm obsessed with the way that Peloton markets themselves, keeps their promises, etc. Now, if you've never heard of Peloton, it's an on-demand workout system where they use both treadmills and bikes, and probably they'll come up with even more machines that support their business. And they have fitness instructors who are actually brands within the brands. They actually call their fitness instructors the talent. And right now, at the time of this recording, they already have over 1 million riders and runners and growing. And they've started to dominate the fitness world. Now, if you ask me what their dominant archetype is, it's definitely the maverick. They were someone who came in to disrupt the industry, and they are succeeding at that. And the reason is because they came in both aesthetically and like all the things that go with it, like their fitness instructors, like the way that they've set up the home screen of their app. It's very, very functional. So another brand that I think has functional aesthetics is the Away brand. Now, Away is a luggage company, and they changed the game in what is basically a commodity business, which is baggage and luggage. But in a world where people don't want to pay thousands of dollars for luxury luggage, they've created functional products that wear and tear really well. I actually own an entire line of Away luggage, and I absolutely love it. Now, my husband has been a Samsonite guy and a Tumi guy forever. And actually, Samsonite bought Tumi a couple years ago. And I got to tell you, if I put them up head to head, functionally, Away has built their products aesthetically to not just look good, but perform very well. Next time you're at the airport, I want you to notice how many Away brand luggage you see, because they are really starting to dominate. And just to let you know what their brand archetype is, it's alchemist. So they have innovated and transformed a commodity business. The next iconic innovative brand that is very functional is Warby Parker. They democratized the purchasing of an item that a lot of people need, right? But a lot of times it's out of reach financially for a lot of people. Let me give you an example of that. I recently moved from Hawaii to San Francisco, and I went to get a new optometrist, and I could not believe how much a new pair of glasses was going to cost me. Just for the rims that I wanted, it was going to be over $500. And then with the special lenses I wanted, it was going to cost over $1,000. And I am functionally blind. If you really knew me, you'd know that I've been wearing Coke bottle glasses since second grade. And so I have very, very specific needs in terms of my eyesight. So one of the things Warby Parker did is they made their mission such that having access to sight was a human right. Okay, so they cut out the middleman and made it possible for all of us to access stylish spectacles at an approachable price. And they did it, and they're still cool and sexy and functional. And so when you think about Warby Parker, their dominant brand archetype is advocate. And they are a great example of the advocate archetype, because a lot of advocate archetypes actually don't know how to stand out. And mainly it's based on their mission, and they work around that. So another functional brand that I want to mention is the Dollar Shave Club. They went ahead on with the $3.5 billion shaving industry and awoke a sleeping giant by offering something that no one was used to, which was affordable razor blades that both men and women could get shipped straight to your home. Now, the thing that keeps them really sticky is their newsletter that they deliver with their razors. My husband lives for this newsletter, and he raves about how funny and entertaining they are. So what they've done is they've taken a commodity product, they've shown people how affordable it can be. They've gone up against brands like Gillette and said everybody can get decent razors for a decent price. But how they made it really, really interesting is they started to engage their customers in lighthearted jabs and funniness about everyday living. And that makes their dominant brand archetype the provocateur. So I mentioned earlier, right, that if you have not heard me teaching on archetypes, if you're just starting to listen to this podcast, definitely right after you complete this one, go over to the episode on brand archetypes. And also I give away your dominant brand archetype at brandarchetypequiz.com, where you can get full access to knowing what is the dominant unfair advantage for your brand. And if you're really interested in the whole thing, you can actually get the archetype influence mix, which is the blend of the top 3 archetypes that influence how your aesthetics should show up. So if you want to do that, you can go ahead to brandarchetypequiz.com, get your dominant archetype, and then you'll have the opportunity to actually get your other 2 archetypes as well. All right, so let's wrap up this episode with the 5th consideration in aesthetics, which is relevance. So there's 2 really outstanding ways to be relevant with your aesthetics. So first, create a character that has your brand colors in it. Now, the most famous brand that did this is Coca-Cola. Did you know that Coca-Cola invented Santa Claus? Yep, that's not a made-up story. Coca-Cola, in their advertising decades ago, wanted to create an iconic character that no one would forget. So when you think of that older, white, chubby gentleman named Santa Claus, what are the colors that he wears? Red and white. And they did that on purpose to be able to have that both conscious and subconscious affiliation with their soda, okay? The next way to be relevant is to shift when the market does. Apple has actually changed their logo 5 times. Starbucks has changed their logo 4+ times. And the point is, as I said earlier, your brand can evolve. In fact, it will evolve. So here's what I need you to do. I need you to get your beautiful brand face out there, because we need more femfluencers in the world. We need to see you, and we need to jump onto your movement. So now, in wrapping up, I want to give you the worksheet portion of this episode. In the 5 categories of aesthetics that I mentioned in this episode, where does your brand stand in each of these areas? One way you can do that is you can go to Pinterest and start your own pin board on these areas to help you creatively put together your own rebrand. And if you want deeper training on this, I'd love to invite you into my program, the Master Brand Program, where I show you how to use your dominant brand archetype to create the most affluential and influential brand possible. And you can find out how to join the program or get on our wait list on the show notes of this episode. But to really deliver messages with influence and affluence, your messages have to ride the right machines to get to your people. Yes, because it's not just about messaging. It's about the mechanics and how it's going to get to the people that you as a messenger want to reach. And that's the topic we're going to cover in our next episode, so don't miss it.
Thanks for listening to Femfluence Radio. If you resonated with this episode, please leave us a review and let other women know about it. Remember, we're building longer tables here. Follow us on Instagram at femfluence_official to stay in the conversation, and also visit femfluence.com to sign up and receive things I only give to our listeners and friends. I look forward to our next